Shell? Shell? Her brother awoke her in a hushed voice. What? She yawned. It was still dark. Someone's here, K-Dunter whined. It's probably just Mum. Go back to bed. Sheldunter turned over lazily, content to go back asleep. It took her groggy mind to fully materialize what her brother had said. She shot up with a jolt. Shit, 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 shit! As she quietly cursed herself. She grabbed K-Dunter by the hand and stood in a crouch. Listening carefully, she could hear light footsteps in the other room. Sheldunter moved close to the kitchen counter and began to feel for something. She had remembered it sitting there, but never thought to grab it until now. Smooth, smooth, smooth. Her hand touched something. Her hand shot up and grabbed it by the blade, wincing as it cut into her soft flesh. The knife was now in her hands. Now she just had to get K-Dunter to a safe place. Kay? Remember that cupboard you crawled into? Yeah? Hide in it, quietly. K-Dunter did as his sister commanded, being extra careful as to not make a sound. The footsteps started heading for the kitchen. Panicked, Sheldunter moved to find a hiding place of her own. She snuck behind a table as the footsteps materialized into a figure walking up to the window. The shape of its feathery head silhouetted against the fiery skyline. The Veek looked around the room, causing Sheldunter to freeze. She could feel his eyes pass over her, but not stopping. Her lungs started to ache. She had barely noticed that she was holding her breath. Please, just go away, her thoughts cried out. Boom! Everything shook. The windows, the walls, even her very bones. It was distant. It had to be. If it wasn't, the very building would have come down. She peered over to see that the Veek was now looking outside, likely searching for the source of the sound. This was her chance, Wallace distracted. The knife was clutched in her bloodied hand, and she moved with swift silence. She was close now, closer than she would ever want to be to such a vile being. The thought of her brother's safety was driving her forward, as she thrust the knife into its neck. The Veek thrust forward, but Sheldunter held onto the knife, determined. The sound was horrendous, the sudden gasp, then gurgling. She grabbed onto its shoulder and pulled the knife out, only to thrust it back in. It tried its best to shake her off, but she wouldn't budge. This is for Mum, Sheldunter thought, the knife going in again. Just when it felt like the Veek had no fight left, it bucked back, sending them crashing onto the table. She was trapped under its body, the sound of gurgling seeming to last an eternity. In that moment, all there was to do was suddenly weep, as she waited for it to finally die. After a few minutes, her brother peeked out from the cupboard. Shell? Are you still there? Kay, don't look. I'm okay. Just stay there, Sheldunter pleaded. Despite her protest, the cupboard squeaked open, and her brother crawled out. He let out a soft gasp as he saw the scene in front of him. Damn it, Kay, Sheldunter thought to herself. K-Dunter walked over to the table and began pushing on the Veek. With her brother's help, she was able to roll it off of her. The body fell to the ground with a loud thud, causing K-Dunter to jump back. Sheldunter hopped off the table and wrapped around her brother in a hug. Ew, you're all sticky and you smell weird. She pulled back. In the heat of the moment, she hadn't realized that she was covered in blood. Sorry. Can we go back to sleep? I'm still tired. She ruffled the fur on his head and chuckled nervously. Not here. We have to get moving. She brought him into another hug. It was a miracle that they were still alive. Ach, you're still sticky. Rod and the diplomat were the first to go. Rod got cut up and the civilian, well, he got spit in the face. It just fucking melted off. I've never seen anything like it. Then Alvarez got snatched up soon after. Snatched up? Campos asked. He wasn't sure if he had heard him right. Woods nodded his head solemnly. Two of the bastards grabbed him and flew off, like some shit you'd see in a movie. Campos wrote it down in his notebook, then looked back up. What happened next? There were so many of them. Complete chaos. We couldn't get any clear shots. There were... He stopped for a moment. People everywhere. A kid ran out to Zeke. He couldn't understand what the kid was saying. He was half full of tears and fear, so Zeke picked him up and we ran for one of the buildings. I still don't know why the kid ran up to us, but that decision sure as hell saved his life. Woods began to choke up for a few moments. Take your time. I know it can be hard. I've seen what they do, Hartosh said, trying to reassure him. Woods waved him off. No, I'm good. He took a deep breath in and continued. We went into some kind of nursery. I don't know, there were eggs everywhere in incubators. That's where we met Jacquard. He was trying to get as many of the nurses out before the Veek busted in, but they wouldn't have it. They wouldn't leave the eggs. Eventually we made our way into some tunnels, only managing to get one nurse to go with us. She grabbed as many eggs as she could carry, but that only turned out to be the death of her later on. Jesus, what happened to the rest of the eggs? Harrison blurted out. Not sure, but I doubt anything good. Wood shook his head. In the tunnels was where Zeke got killed. Didn't check a corner and got cut down by a Veek clad in black armor. Must have been some kind of special unit or some shit, but the armor wasn't very effective when we mech dumped his ass. From there we grabbed what we could from Zeke and surfaced. Found this place a block or two away and had been gathering people to come by. Just about every day we've been attacked, but we've managed to hold them back for now, though we're running low on ammo and food. When he was done speaking, Campos pulled out Patrick's notebook. What do you make of this? It's from one of the Canadians. Woods took it and flipped through the pages in thought. Don't know about any of them around here. Last I heard they were over in a city called Comtotum. Whoever this is sure likes to draw. Not that they draw well. Looks like a kid had a field day in here. He closed the book and placed it on a nearby desk. What now? We continue with... Campos trailed off and took a moment to look around. Several of the people in the room were looking at them. They were desperate, barely holding on as it is. If his squad were to leave, it would be unlikely that they would survive the battle. He shook his head, dismissing what he was about to say. Hartosh raised his eyebrows and crossed his arms. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you are about to suggest that we leave these people here. Campos gave him a side-eye, not fully meeting his gaze. I've reconsidered. I scrubbed the mission anyways, remember? The scout nodded his head thoughtfully. So then, Sergeant, what's the plan? The squad leader pulled out his map and set it on the desk and leaned against it. He traced his finger across the route they had taken to the building they were currently in. With a satisfied tap, he stood back up. Woods, the map says that there's an open area to the northwest of this building. A plaza of some sort. What is the visual on that? The Marine shrugged. Not much other than a few tables and benches, some shrubs, that sort of thing. There is a wrecked tram maybe 200 feet away from the building. It has a big gun on it, but I doubt anyone could get it moving. Campos looked over at Hartosh. Any idea about that? He considered something, absentmindedly flicking his tail. A military tram, usually used for escorting and the such, though I doubt it will be of any use to us if it's immobile. Not if the gun is still operational, Tyr butted in. Campos pointed at him and nodded his head. Exactly. If we can get that gun working, then that will greatly increase our firepower. Hartosh's face slowly shifted into an emotion of understanding. Hart? Find someone who knows how to work one of those things. Hartosh gave a grunt of affirmation and turned around, searching presumably for Jacquard. Campos turned back to the map, this time tracing back from their location. He passed over where they had stayed the night, moving his finger south to an approximate location. If we're going to hold up here, we'll need some more firepower than just that tram, and a way to radio back our position. What are you saying? Harrison asked concernedly. Probably the dumbest thing I've ever considered in a leadership position. Campos chuckled nervously. We need to go back to the Humvees. They're filled with vital equipment that we'll need if we are to survive here. Woods furrowed his brow. You mean that you don't have your Vicks with you? What happened? Tyr rubbed the back of his head and turned to the side, trying to hide his shame. We got ambushed, and a Vic decided he wanted to be painted across the windshield. Woods and the other Marine he was with, Saunders, looked at each other. Before they could continue, Hartosh had returned, with a familiar Dakar with dark fur. Campos and his squad looked at him. He seemed nervous from their last encounter, but he also seemed nonetheless determined. Hartosh turned to Campos. This is Tenshok. I'm sure you know that he was the one we met earlier. If anyone here can get that tram started and that steam cannon working, then it's him. Alright, good. Campos walked up to Tenshok and patted him on the shoulder. Hartosh, there's another thing I need you to ask everyone here. We need to go back to the Humvees and get as much equipment as we can carry, which means we need as many able-bodied people to come with us as we can spare, Dakar included. We'll move once it gets dark to avoid detection, but I think it would be preferable if we utilize the tunnel systems. So along with any volunteers you can muster, we need someone who can navigate the underground proficiently. Hartosh looked around the room for a moment, then said something in his language. He talked for a while. Assumedly he was explaining the situation. When he was done speaking, all eyes were on him, and the room went silent. Then Jakar stepped forward, soon followed by a civilian standing up, and several others. Even the woman who, until now, was holding her child stood up. Hartosh turned to Campos, looking him in the eye. These are the volunteers, Sergeant. They will do whatever is needed of them. All right, Hartosh, I need a head count, Campos ordered. He looked at the brave people that had answered the call for the mission, only 2 of which were actually military. It was desperation he hadn't seen since Chibus. It filled him with pride for his people, that even in the darkest moments there were still those who would never give up. 6, 7 including me, Hartosh called back. All right, same here. Do they know the plan? Campos said, as he checked his Marine's gear. Hartosh turned to the people under his charge. Does everyone understand what we're doing? Does anyone need a refresher? The woman raised her hand. Yes, sir. I could use one. Don't worry, Sigurok, I remember, Jakar said. We follow the Esra into the tunnels. I will guide them to where we need to go. From there we collect supplies from some strange machines called Humvees. Then we come back here. Simple enough. Right, of course. Thank you, Jakard. Sigurok pulled her hair back and tucked it into her blouse. I'm all ready then. All right, Sergeant. Everyone is good to go. Hartosh loaded a magazine into his rifle. He still found the thing uncomfortably small, but it was still leagues better than lugging around a steam rifle. Doc said his farewell to Campos, and the group of 14 filed down to the lower level of the building, where the access point to the tunnel was located. Tenshok and Jakar pushed a dresser that was barricading the hatch. It slowly slid off with a loud screech, causing many to cover their ears. Campos crouched down, finding the handle and pulling the hatch open. It was predictably dark down there. Any power that was running the lights down there had run out. Hartosh sighed deeply. Dark tunnels were not something he particularly enjoyed. At least with the human night vision he could see without too much trouble. He would be in the lead with Jakard, so the 2 were first in the hole. Doc was kind enough to lend Jakard his night vision, so he could actually guide them in the dark. Hartosh thought how silly he looked with the human helmet on, then realised that he was probably more of a ridiculous sight himself. He shook the thought as he helped Jakard turn on the monocular. Wow, this Eastford device is amazing. I don't think I would have believed it worked if I weren't seeing it with my own eyes. Jakar quickly composed himself and focused on the task at hand. He looked at some signs that were posted on the wall and seemed to think for a minute. "All right, this way. Follow," he whispered. After moving a few 100 feet, they had devolved into some kind of human-to-car train. Each person had their hand on the one in front of them. The method was especially useful for those that couldn't see. While they tried to be quiet, more than a dozen half-blind people fumbling through a tunnel wasn't exactly the pinnacle of stealth. The matter of fact was that any Veek trudging down there would hear them coming long before the contrary. "Shush! Shush! I see something," Jakar whispered back. Hartosh could see it too. It was faint but visible. It wasn't clear who it was, but from the flickering, they had to have a torch or some source of fire. "Let them pass. If they come this way, then we'll shoot them dead," Hartosh ordered in a hushed voice. They all went still as the light grew. Some even held their breath. The clicking of claws on the hard ground and clattering of metal grew near. They were definitely not Dakar. Then they finally came into view, causing Hartosh to instinctively raise his rifle, but he still floated his finger off the trigger. They wore something that he had never seen before, armor that was coal black and had many sharp angles. From the look of it, the sharp angles were likely there to deflect steam rifle rounds. Their heads were still exposed, however. A lucky shot would be more than enough to take one out. They waited. Hartosh found that even he had begun to hold his breath. As the group passed, one of the Veek soldiers stopped and looked in their direction. Hartosh's hair stood up on end, and he placed his finger on the trigger. The Veek seemed to stare right into his eyes, causing him to twist his face in a silent snarl. The moment dragged on, Hartosh's hate almost getting the better of him. Then it was over. The Veek turned to follow his comrades through the tunnels. It hadn't seen them. At least a minute passed since the light had disappeared before Jakar began to move again. Noticeably, they were more careful to move quietly from that point on. Thankfully, Jakar seemed to know his way around. Though anything was better than when Campos had them fumbling around the tunnels the previous night. "All right, we're almost there. The hatch should be just ahead of us." Jakar stuck his hand to the ceiling and dragged it across as he moved. His claws rattled against something, and a moment later came the sound of a hatch opening. "All right, this is it. Be quiet," Jakar whispered, as he moved to help Hartosh up. He stepped on Jakar's back and lifted himself into the familiar building. The previously barricaded door had been broken down, and now was open to the street. Thankfully, the darkness concealed him from any Veek that could be outside. Hartosh poked his head back into the hatch and whispered down, "Send the humans up. We'll make sure it's clear for everyone else." After some shifting around, Campos began to crawl out of the hole, to which he was soon followed by each of his squad members. Campos soon started issuing orders, as the last of them climbed into the hallway. "Tyr, I want eyes on that street ASAP. Bodine, pull rear security. Everyone else on me." Hartosh moved close to the squad leader and kneeled beside him. He waited patiently for Tyr's report on the state of the vehicles. However, it only took a few moments before Tyr joined them once more. "I counted only 3 of the birds, 2 of which are asleep. Everything else is as we left it. It's clear they know the Humvees are important, but haven't touched anything yet from the looks of it." Campos peered out of the broken-down door and aimed his rifle. He fired 3 controlled shots before pulling back and turning around. "Well, that's that. Bring everyone up." Hartosh dropped his jaw in shock. He couldn't believe how effectively he cleared the objective. He gathered himself quickly and moved back to the hatch. Jakar grabbed his arm as he offered it, pulling the medic up. Hartosh remained, helping the rest of the group up as the others started on the vehicles. Grab whatever the humans give you. They know what to get, he ordered to each one he pulled up. Come on, move quickly now. We haven't got much time. When the last one had come through, Hartosh unslung his rifle and headed outside. The Marines had already gone to work, and a small pile of equipment lay beside the Humvees. Let's go, Hart. Get everyone to start carrying things, as much as they can, Tyr called from the turret of the rear vehicle. Hartosh ran up to the pile and picked up several belts of ammo. He began handing them out to the nearest car. Soon they caught on, and all of them quickly followed suit in collecting the gear. Hartosh saw Campos place a wooden box near the front of the rear Humvee and left it there. He thought it was odd, as all of the other equipment was placed away from the vehicles. When he went to pick it up, however, Campos swiped his hand away. Don't worry about that, those are demolition charges. We're going to make sure the Veek can't pick off anything we leave here. What exactly are demolition charges? Hartosh asked, eyeing the box. It didn't look like it was a special box of any kind, which made it all the more terrifying because of its said power. Campos smirked. They're made of a material that is highly reactive when exposed to electrical currents. The reaction is so violent it goes faster than sound, which creates quite a big boom. Let us deal with it. You worry about your guys. Have someone grab that 240. He pointed to Tyr, who was passing down a large gun from the rear Humvee. Hartosh looked around and saw Segorok not holding anything. He grabbed her and pointed to the gun in question. She was quick to catch on and relieved it from one of the Marines. Before she stepped away, Harrison laid several belts of ammunition on her. Segorok seemed to take the weight well enough, though it did look tough on her. The speed at which the Marines grabbed what they needed was impressive. They were getting ready to leave in less than 10 minutes. Cleverly enough, they had even employed a stretcher to carry more stuff. Hartosh picked up 2 large boxes of what he presumed to be ammo when Campos began to speak up. Alright, we got 5 minutes to get out of the blast zone. Hart, tell your people to get moving. We don't want to be anywhere near this place when it goes up. Hartosh ran up to Jacquard, giving a nod of affirmation to Campos. On his way, he nudged others to get back into the building. Jack, it's time to go. We have to move quickly. Jacquard heaved a box over his shoulders and craned his neck to look at Hartosh. The skinny medic was surprisingly strong, the heavy box barely hampering him. All right. Let's get going then. Jacquard took the lead back into the building. Now, they were on the home stretch.